My wife used me for 7 years while sleeping with her high school boyfriend, so I left with the savings, filed divorce, and let her beg on Facebook. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and I thought I'd found the love of my life. Emma wasn't just beautiful. She had this kind of charm that made you forget everything else around you. The way she laughed, the way she listened when I talked about my work or my stupid little hobbies, all felt effortless, like we were meant to find each other in this crazy world. I met her at a mutual friend's party 7 years ago, and from that first conversation, I knew she was different. She was ambitious, sharp, and had these goals that made me admire her even more. I trusted her completely, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that the kind of love you see in movies was real, tangible, and meant for me. Our first few years together were like a dream, carefully pieced together. We moved into a small apartment downtown, splitting the bills and decorating it with thrift store finds and our laughter. Weekends were for exploring the city, cooking messy dinners, and binge-watching shows we'd argue over which episodes were the best. We talked about the future constantly, saving for a house, vacations we'd take, maybe even kids someday. I could see the wedding youths standing in a tiny chapel or on a beach somewhere, promising to hold each other through everything. It all felt right. Family and friends fell in love with her almost as fast as I did. My parents adored her. My friends were convinced I'd finally met someone who made me happy, and I couldn't disagree. Every gathering was a showcase of our life, and everyone complimented how compatible we were. I felt proud, like maybe, finally, someone understood me completely. But there were tiny cracks, almost invisible at first. A phone that buzzed a little too quickly. A defensiveness when I asked about her day, subtle shifts in her tone when talking about old friends. I noticed them vaguely, but love makes you blind, or maybe it just makes you hopeful. I ignored the flickers, convincing myself that everyone has quirks, that everyone has secrets. They keep tucked away harmlessly. Emma was mine, and that was all that mattered. Until the first small shadow of doubt crept in. I remember the first few months after we got married, like a movie that plays in slow motion. Our apartment felt warmer somehow, filled with laughter. Our favorite mugs stacked in the kitchen, and the soft hum of music in the background. I was proud of how we had built this little life together. Everything seemed so balanced. I went to work, she pursued her ambitious career, and in the evenings we'd cook together, talk about our day, and plan for the future. I truly believed that this was the life everyone dreams of, but soon. The cracks I'd ignored before started to show in small, almost imperceptible ways. Emma became subtly controlling about money, insisting on managing our joint account, making jokes about my spending, and suggesting I leave the big decisions to her. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was normal, just part of her strong personality. "Babe, you worry too much," she'd say, with that warm smile that made it impossible to argue. And I believed her, because love is convenient when it blinds you. Even family gatherings, which used to feel joyful, began to highlight a different dynamic. She'd whisper comments under her breath about my choices, laugh at my minor mistakes, or make subtle comparisons to her friends' successful partners. I tried to shrug it off, convincing myself that maybe I was just overthinking, that she didn't mean it that way. Friends told me I was lucky to have someone so perfect, and I repeated it to myself like a mantra. I was lucky, but there were nights when I noticed her phone buzzing late, or her gaze lingering on messages she wouldn't show me. When I asked casually, she'd shrug or change the subject. "It's nothing, just a work thing," she'd say, and I'd believe it to her at least. I'd pretend to. I wanted to trust her completely, because that's what love felt like. The tension, small as it was, began to seed doubt in the back of my mind. I told myself it was normal, that every couple has secrets, tiny things they don't share, but deep down, a quiet unease had begun to creep in. Something didn't feel right, and I couldn't shake it. That nagging feeling became the whisper I couldn't ignore, though I had no idea it was about to grow into a roar. It happened one evening when I came home earlier than usual from work. The apartment was quiet, almost unnaturally so, and the faint smell of her perfume lingered in the air. I found Emma on the couch, scrolling on her phone, her lips curling into a smile that didn't feel like it was for me. My stomach twisted, a pit forming as I caught sight of a name that felt familiar, a name from her past, her high school boyfriend. I told myself it was probably nothing, just an old friend, but the unease gnawed at me. "You're home early," she said, looking up with that same warm smile I'd always trusted. Her eyes darted to her phone for a split second, and that flicker of defensiveness hit me like a cold wave. "Yeah, just wrapped up some extra work," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. I wanted to believe her, wanted to shrug it off like the little signs I'd ignored before. But my gut was screaming that something had changed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little detail replayed in my mind. The way she laughed at her phone, the quick swipe when I came in, the subtle tension in her posture. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was being paranoid, that it was normal for couples to have private conversations with old friends. But the whisper of doubt had grown into a steady hum I couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, I noticed patterns I hadn't before. Late nights at work, sudden weekend plans with friends she couldn't fully name, a phone that seemed glued to her hand. Every time I asked, her responses were light, almost dismissive. "It's just nothing. Don't worry," she said, but I felt worry crawling into every corner of my chest. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But trust felt like it was slipping through my fingers. And then came the first comment that truly shook me. She mentioned him casually in a story, laughing about a memory they shared. And the way she said his name, it wasn't nostalgic. It was warm, intimate, like she was reliving something private. My mind froze, a cold realization washing over me. Maybe this was bigger than I ever imagined. And with that thought, I knew the life I thought I had built with her might be unraveling. Thread by thread, the weeks that followed felt like walking through fog. I started noticing small, almost imperceptible patterns. Her phone always face down, notifications silenced, hushed conversations when I was nearby. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was stressed at work. Maybe everyone has a private life. But my gut no longer allowed me to ignore the signs. Something had shifted, and I couldn't shake the creeping suspicion that I was being deceived. One evening, I was making dinner while she sat on the couch, absently scrolling through her phone. She laughed at something, that same soft, intimate laugh, and I heard a name I hadn't wanted to hear again. My hands froze on the knife I was chopping vegetables with. "Who's that?" I asked casually, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her smile tight, and shrugged. "Just someone from work. Don't worry about it." But her eyes flicked away, and I saw the hesitation. Friends and family began to fuel my unease without even knowing it. Offhand remarks about old classmates or vague mentions of her high school boyfriend made my stomach churn. Each casual story, each nostalgic memory she shared, started to feel like a puzzle I couldn't solve. I felt trapped between wanting to trust her completely and a gnawing sense that I was being lied to every day. Emma's defensiveness grew more noticeable. Little arguments erupted over insignificant things: a misplaced wallet, a forgotten errand. Each one ended with her twisting the blame in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. I caught myself overanalyzing every word, every glance, every small inconsistency. It was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth, even if it meant facing something I wasn't ready for. By the end of the week, the unease had grown into a tangible weight. I was constantly second-guessing her, replaying conversations, looking for signs, and then, one night, I overheard a message notification on her phone that made my heart sink. The tone, the wording, it wasn't casual. It was intimate. My chest tightened, and I realized the betrayal I'd feared wasn't just possible, it was happening right under my nose. It all came crashing down one evening when I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had tried, really tried, to rationalize the little things, the late texts, the secretive laughter, the sudden defensive tone, but something inside me refused to stay silent. I found myself standing in the hallway, watching her laugh at a message on her phone, the glow from the screen illuminating her face in a way that made my stomach twist. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, pushed me to peek, and then I saw it, unmistakable proof. The texts were from him or her high school boyfriend. The kind of messages couples send when they're not just reminiscing, but reconnecting intimately. Remember reading the words over and over, disbelief clashing with rage. "Can't wait to see you," one read. "I miss you so much," said another. My hands shook, and I felt a hollowness spread through me, like the life I thought I had built had been drained out. Emma's betrayal wasn't casual or fleeting. It had been deliberate and ongoing. 7 years of my love, trust, and sacrifice is a cover for her secret life. When she noticed my expression, I couldn't contain myself. "Emma, what is this?" My voice was low, but every syllable carried the weight of betrayal. She froze, fingers hovering over the screen, and then forced a smile. "It's nothing, I swear. Just an old friend," she said, the defensiveness clear. But I had already seen the truth, and nothing she said could erase it. The emotional fallout was immediate. My chest felt tight, my hands numb, my mind racing with every memory we had shared, now tainted with doubt. I couldn't believe it. How could someone you trusted completely manipulate and deceive you for so long? Every small argument, every defensive tone now felt like a piece of the puzzle, and the picture it formed made my heart ache. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the texts, the laughter, the warmth I had mistaken for love. My world had shifted, and there was no going back. I realized that the person I had devoted my life to wasn't just flawed, she had been using me. And with that understanding, the first seeds of what I would do next began to take root. Though I had no idea how far this path would go, I thought seeing those texts was the worst of it. I thought knowing about her betrayal was the hardest truth I'd have to face. But the midweek that followed shattered even that assumption. I stumbled across her old email account, one she'd forgotten to log out of on my laptop. Curiosity gnawed at me, a mix of fear and inevitability, and I clicked. What I found made my stomach turn and my hands tremble. Years of detailed conversations, plans to meet in secret, hidden photos, and excuses she had crafted to manipulate me while keeping her double life hidden. I sank into the living room chair, the dim light from the lamp casting shadows across the walls, feeling utterly hollow. Every memory I had, cherished the trips, the quiet nights, the milestones, was now laced with deceit. It wasn't just casual messages or occasional flirtation. She had been living a parallel life, nurturing an affair under my nose for years, all while presenting herself as the perfect wife. I felt a mixture of rage, sorrow, and disbelief, emotions colliding in a way I had never experienced. When she came home that evening, I confronted her with the evidence. "Emma, all of this, why?" My voice was raw, a fragile mix of fury and pain. She looked at me, caught yet composed, and uttered words that made my blood run cold. "I didn't mean to hurt you. We're complicated. That word didn't begin to cover the years of lies, the manipulation, the emotional theft she had perpetrated. I realized, in that instant, that I had been blind, naive, and too trusting. And yet, amid the heartbreak, a strange clarity emerged. I didn't have to stay a victim. I didn't have to crumble in the shadow of her betrayal. For the first time, I understood that my next steps had to be deliberate, calculated, and entirely about reclaiming my life. As I sat there that night, the weight of betrayal pressing down, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Things were never going to be the same. And deep down, I began to sense that the reckoning wasn't just going to hurt was going to be mine to control. The first seeds of the plan I would follow were planted, and nothing could stop them now. I spent the next few days in a haze of anger, disbelief, and a strange kind of focus. Every moment with Emma felt like walking through a minefield. Her smiles, her casual touches, the way she moved around the apartment like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything had changed. I realized that reacting impulsively, yelling, begging, or confronting her in front of friends or family would only hand her more control. I couldn't afford that. I had to act strategically. I started by quietly organizing my finances. Every joint account, every savings plan, every credit line carefully documented and secured. I knew I would need evidence, not just for my own clarity, but to protect myself legally. Each night, I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, creating a meticulous record of transactions, emails, and the messages I had uncovered. The more I documented, the more my mind cleared. Anger was still there, simmering, but it began to feel like fuel, something I could channel into reclaiming my life rather than letting it consume me. Emma, oblivious to my growing awareness and quiet preparation, continued her routine as if nothing had happened. She laughed at my jokes, brought me coffee in bed, and pretended our life was still perfect. Each act of normalcy only made the betrayal feel sharper, but I kept my face calm, my words neutral. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I thought about confrontation, about revealing her lies to friends or family immediately, but I knew it would feel messy, reactive. I wanted control, not chaos. The power in this situation, I realized, wasn't in my anger, it was in my patience, in my ability to wait until every piece was in place. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I made the decision. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to plead. I wasn't going to let 7 years of manipulation define me. I was going to leave, take what was rightfully mine, and let the consequences fall on her without me having to lift a finger. And in that quiet, calculated moment, I felt the first real spark of empowerment I had experienced since discovering the betrayal in Ember, that would grow into something unstoppable, even with my plan forming in my mind. There was a moment when it all felt unbearable. One night, I came home early, hoping to catch Emma off guard, or perhaps confront the nagging fear in my chest, only to find her laughing softly at a message on her phone. That laugh was the same one I had loved for years, warm and intimate, but now it cut through me like glass. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for the first time, I felt completely powerless. 7 years of love, trust, and dedication all feeling meaningless in that instant. I went to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The apartment felt suffocating, each wall pressing in, each familiar object a reminder of what had been stolen from me. I could feel my throat tighten with unshed tears, a raw ache spreading through my chest. I thought about every shared memory, the trips, the quiet nights, the mornings we'd sip coffee and talk about our dreams, and the bitter realization hit me. She had been living a parallel life all along, and I had been blind. I remember staring at the ceiling, asking myself how I could have missed it. How had I been so trusting, so naive? The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, systematic, and personal. I felt anger, yes, but beneath it, there was a deep, hollow grief that left me shaking. It was the kind of moment where you question yourself, your worth, and everything you thought was solid in your life. But amid the pain, something strange happened. Clarity. I realized that this was my breaking point, my rock bottom, and it had to serve as a turning point. I didn't want to stay here, curled up in heartbreak, feeling defeated. The fire of betrayal ignited something else. Resolve? I would take action, but it would have to be careful, deliberate, and fully in my control. As I sat there in the dark, phone forgotten on the nightstand, I knew one undeniable truth. My life was about to change, and this time, I would be the one deciding the outcome. The weight of despair was heavy, but in it, the first seeds of my revenge and empowerment were planted. After nights of sleepless contemplation, I finally began putting my plan into motion. Every detail had to be perfect, one misstep, and I could lose everything or give Emma a chance to manipulate me again. I started quietly separating our finances, transferring my share of the savings into accounts she didn't know about. Every document, every bill, every message was carefully archived. This wasn't about vengeance yet. It was about securing my future and reclaiming control over a life that had been stolen from me. I went about my daily routine as if nothing had changed, keeping my face calm, my tone neutral, my laughter natural. Emma remained completely unaware, continuing her daily habits, texting, calling, laughing, with that warmth that now felt sinister. The juxtaposition of her obliviousness and the evidence I held made my chest tighten, not with pain, but with a quiet, dangerous satisfaction. I could almost feel the shift. The power was slowly moving into my hands. Every interaction became a calculated step. I was careful not to raise suspicion, never letting her see the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. "Are you okay?" she asked one evening, brushing her hair behind her ear. I smiled faintly. "Yeah, just tired." And she believed it, of course, because she never expected that the person she'd manipulated for years was quietly taking everything she thought was hers. I noticed her movements more keenly, every glance, every touch. Every casual laugh that used to warm me now felt like a reminder of her betrayal. But instead of despair, it fueled me. I wasn't just planning an exit. I was planning a clean break of departure that would ensure I walked away with my dignity, my security, and the upper hand. That night, as I double-checked the final transfers and read through the archived messages one last time, a calm determination settled over me. I would leave, and when I did, it wouldn't just be a separation, it would be a reckoning. Emma would finally understand what it meant to be on the other side of manipulation, and for the first time in years, I felt the spark of freedom flicker, growing brighter with every careful step I took toward reclaiming my life. The day I finally filed for divorce, the tension in the apartment was almost tangible. Emma had no idea. Of course, she went about her morning routine, humming softly as she sipped her coffee, while I calmly signed the papers, every stroke of the pen a quiet assertion of control. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't falter. For the first time, I felt the full weight of empowerment. I wasn't angry in a reckless way anymore. I was calculated, deliberate, and in charge. When I finally told her, it was like the room itself held its breath. Emma, I filed. "We're done," I said, my tone neutral but firm. Her expression shifted from confusion to panic in seconds, her eyes widening as if she had just realized the extent of what she'd lost. "What? Wait. You can't," she stammered, but I cut her off with a calm, almost icy statement. "I can, and I did. Everything you've been hiding, every secret, every light ends now, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Then came the subtle part of the plan: public exposure. I didn't blast her on social media outright, but I made small, carefully worded posts that hinted at deception, betrayal, and manipulation without naming names. Within hours, the whispers started. Mutual friends began questioning her, her old acquaintances reached out, and her carefully curated image began to crack. Emma's phone buzzed nonstop, her desperate messages and calls ignored by me as I watched her panic from a distance. Seeing her unravel was surreal. The confident, charming woman I had loved was suddenly vulnerable, exposed, and scrambling for control she no longer had. "Please, don't do this," she begged, her voice raw, trembling. But I remained silent, letting the consequences unfold naturally. The power had shifted, and I wasn't about to return it that night. As I watched her frantic messages pile up, I realized something profound. I hadn't needed to yell, plead, or fight to reclaim my life. The betrayal had been hers, and justice had found its own way through my careful planning. But even as relief washed over me, a lingering thought stayed in my mind. Would she ever truly understand what she had done? And that question left me with a quiet, tense satisfaction. By the time the divorce was finalized, the shift was complete. Emma had gone from untouchable and manipulative to exposed and scrambling, and I finally felt a sense of closure that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. The accounts were settled, the legal papers signed, and the small hints I dropped online had done their work. Friends and acquaintances knew pieces of the truth, enough to watch her carefully crafted facade crumble. I didn't need to gloat. The fallout was visible in her own actions, her desperate attempts to reclaim attention, her frantic social media posts, and the subtle, pleading messages she sent that I didn't respond to. I remember one evening, scrolling past her public posts, seeing her try to justify herself to anyone who would listen. The charm was gone, the manipulative smile replaced by a raw, exposed vulnerability. It wasn't about revenge for me anymore. It was about seeing the consequences unfold naturally, understanding that her years of deception had finally caught up with her. I felt a strange mix of the weeks after the divorce were surreal. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. The apartment felt quieter, yes, but in a good way, a space I could finally claim as entirely my own. I spent mornings walking through the city streets, savoring the freedom to think without fear, to plan without deception lurking behind every corner. Every small victory, from managing my finances independently to reclaiming time that had been stolen, felt like a step toward reclaiming my soul. I focused on myself in ways I hadn't allowed for years. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, poured energy into my work, and even started pursuing hobbies I'd shelved while trying to maintain a life with Emma. Each moment of laughter, each simple pleasure, reinforced a powerful truth. I was capable of happiness without relying on someone who didn't deserve it. I realized that empowerment wasn't about exposing her or orchestrating revenge. It was about taking back my life and rebuilding it on my own terms. Emma's online presence continued to reflect the chaos of her choices, pleading posts, vague confessions, desperate attempts at validation. But I didn't care. Her unraveling was no longer my problem. It was merely the echo of a life she had fractured. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that I had left with my dignity intact, my savings secure, and my mind clear. No public spectacle, no dramatics, just clean, controlled closure. One evening, as I sat by the window with a warm cup of tea, the city lights flickering below, I reflected on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the sleepless nights, they had shaped me, yes, but they had also strengthened me. I understood now that my worth wasn't tied to someone else's loyalty or deceit, and in that moment, I smiled not out of spite, not out of malice, but because I was free. Free to love myself, free to set boundaries, free to rebuild a life I deserved. The past was behind me, and the future, for the first time, was entirely mine. A chapter closed, a life reclaimed, and a woman empowered to never let anyone diminish her again. Satisfaction and peace. Knowing that I had taken control of my life without stooping to bitterness or cruelty. Friends and family noticed the change too. Subtle questions and supportive comments from those who had once unknowingly witnessed the deception reminded me that I wasn't alone. Their validation wasn't the point. I had learned that self mattered more than anyone else's perception, but it underscored the truth. I had acted with clarity, strategy, and dignity. I also had time to reflect on what had truly happened over those 7 years. The betrayal, while devastating, became a lesson in resilience, self-worth, and the importance of boundaries. I realized that the pain had been a catalyst, forcing me to see clearly, act decisively, and prioritize my own life over the illusion of love. As I sat quietly that evening, sipping a drink and looking out over the city lights, I felt a release I hadn't known I needed. The storm had passed, and in its wake was empowerment. Emma had faced the consequences. I had reclaimed my life, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. But the memory of betrayal lingered, a reminder that sometimes the hardest lessons bring the deepest growth, and that satisfaction comes not from revenge alone, but from finally standing tall in your own truth.